Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host to these TechTonic Conversations, a series of conversations with interesting, fascinating leaders, both in the technology leadership domain, but also subject matter experts in other domains relevant to our tech curious audiences. And today, I have an absolute pleasure and a privilege to welcome David Perry. David, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dalibor. This should be fun.
This should be fun. So, David Perry is the co founder of Perry-Martel International. He is a legend of Canadian executive search and recruitment business. Um, Referred to as the rogue recruiter by the Wall Street Journal. And David, today we are going to talk about a couple of really interesting and I think very timely topics. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about you and your journey and your story, which is fascinating. I can't wait to hear it again and hear it at more detail. I am really curious about your view on the current state of executive search and recruitment, specifically for technology roles. So, your CIO, CTO, CDOs. What are you seeing, observing in the market? What are the changes? What are people looking for? What are those key skills and attributes? And also, what do you feel is the right leader for tomorrow? And then I also wanted to touch on a topic that is, I know, very dear to your heart, the flow through shares concept, that you are mobilizing leaders around you and advancing for our Canadian tech ecosystem. But enough me talking. I would love to, David, first invite you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and how you have navigated your career and your life to now
Okay.
be doing what you're doing.
Dalibor, thank you. Everybody, just FYI, Dalibor said I had 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to do this in 5 to 7 because that's what I ask candidates to do. And he may run out of questions because I'm really not that interesting. So here's how my career started. And I've been in the search business since 1985. I graduated McGill in 82, led an expedition to the Arctic. 82 was a horrible year for getting a degree or to get a job. I had a degree in economics and one in industrial relations. In the Arctic, I decided I was going to work for three companies: McDonald's, Consumers Distributing, and Canadian Tire. All three of them have a reputation for taking you to the deep end and casting your feet in and then throwing you in and see if you survive. I got back from the Arctic. Consumers was looking for somebody, and I went and applied. Now, originally, I was going to be an investment banker in New
Okay.
York City. But I was dating this really hot French chick. I'm sure people can relate. I was dating this really hot French chick who told me that if I did that, the relationship wouldn't survive. I had also not gotten a Rhodes Scholarship, but had been offered a full ride to Harvard Law.
Wow.
Again, again, this hot French chick said it's not going to work. So anyway,
Wow.
I ended up in Ottawa. I drew a map around because she was in Montreal. I wanted to date her. So I went out, a certain distance, drew a map, and it was either Cornwall or Ottawa.
Yeah.
So I ended up in Ottawa. I ended up in Consumers Distributing. I stayed for 3 years. I left. I went into banking for 5 months. I left and I went into recruiting. And the reason I went into recruiting is because the entire time I was at Consumers Distributing, I wanted another job. But they were not well organized and
Mm.
not nice people. So I ended up developing this team of other managers who hated their jobs, and we would go into our offices at lunch hour, and we would market each other. I got good at it. I placed 21 of my own people, a couple of managers, and a couple of staff into new jobs. I thought I'd be great at this, so I applied to everybody, and to a door, everybody laughed except one guy. He just couldn't say no strong enough. And on the 12th interview, I showed up at his house at 5 in the morning, and he said, "Well, show up at my house at 5 o'clock before I go run on Sunday, and it'll be the last. That'll be the last interview." Oh, I was there. I found out where he lived. He opened the door. He said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's the last interview."
You
Just funny.
told me
You're hired.
so, right?
You're hired. So persistence, right?
Yeah.
So I started with this company called Harrington Personnel, Kerry Harrington, much older than me now. I'm 65, so he's way older than me. Anyway, I started $500 a month draw and 100% commission. That's the way they did it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and within a couple of months, I'm getting married. So I go and tell the gals that I'm working with, because I'm only one. I opened this executive division for him. He had just been doing secretarial. I said, for God's sake, don't tell Gary if any of my deals close, because he told me if any of your deals close while you're on vacation, you don't get credit for it. We had a
What?
discussion. It was pointless to have that discussion. Anyway, 3 deals closed, $84,000. So I show up the day after my honeymoon,
Yeah.
and I find, we have this discussion, and I got fired because he wasn't going to pay me. He said I got lucky. So I went down the street and got lucky for another recruiting firm. Well, it's funny. In the middle of so I'm talking to this guy who's a
Excellent.
search consultant, and he's asking me what I'm doing, and I'm telling him, and he says, "Oh, that's bullshit. I've been trying to get hold of that guy for 6 months with Brian Greenleaf. He runs Zios here in Ottawa." So I asked for the phone, I called him and had a conversation, and I handed it to John. I said, "Here, John, meet Brian Greenleaf." They have this conversation, and I was hired about an hour later because he'd never been able to get the conversation going. I stayed for, unfortunately, it was kind of depressing. I was rookie of the year the first year I did it.
Yeah.
I billed $99,000 and everybody was excited. I was so disappointed. I mean, I
Really.
couldn't believe, well, come on. Rookie of the year at $99,000? Oh my God. I mean, it hadn't been awarded for ages. So got my rookie of the year stuff. I stayed around for almost another year.
Mm.
I'll tell you why. I specialized in construction and real estate. I ended up with Canderel as a client. I ended up with Bob Compo personally as a client. He was interesting. But that year in 1988, I went until the end of September. I billed $758,000. Now that in the recruiting business is a lot of money
Mm.
in 9 months. And for that, I made 52 grand. Hmm. So
Mhm.
I decided, I came home one day and to tell my wife, who soon became my business partner, that my insurance had just been cut off. I was going to have to pay for it myself. Come on. I'm only making 52,000. I'm bringing in $750,000. I got to pay for my own insurance. I told her, I can do this myself. So long story short, she had inherited a house from her parents, and she convinced her sisters to sell the house, and she took her portion of it and invested in Perry-Martel. So that's the Martel, Anita Martel. So my wife invested in the business. So did my stepmother, the ex-nun. I won't go there, no jokes. And Anita's sister. So that, they bankrolled the first year, and that was how Perry-Martel was born. And I've been lucky all my life, and it was that coming Christmas, and I'm down in Rochester, and I've made a budget for what I'm because I got like 50 grand to play with, right? That's the runway, and I had budgeted $20 for my marketing, and I see this book called Guerrilla Marketing.
Mhm.
So I bought the book and I really liked it. Like it was like 50 things I could do in marketing that cost me nothing. So that's what I started with, right? And
Yeah.
actually, within a year, we're sailing. We're just sailing. And I wrote Jay a letter and said, "Listen, I read the book, loved it. Thank you very much. This would be a wise thing to do years later." So we started in construction and real estate. We did the Dominion, the Toronto Dominion, the two towers.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
We were
Yes.
on
Yeah.
that. We set up.
Okay.
Chuck Magwood and Paul Colangelo had just finished the Dome Stadium for Elliston, and we got the call because they were given like $3 billion from OMERS, and OMERS said go build a real estate empire. So got that deal, and that was a hard one to put together. It took me 3 days to find the guy, 3 days. But by the time I found the guy, by the way, there were only 21 people in 19 companies that fit the profile in the whole country. Okay, I was very specific with Chuck, and there's only two that said that everybody else wouldn't work for him. Okay, there's only two that said they would work for him. So I
Really?
present, yeah. So I presented one candidate, and anyway, that candidate, we closed that deal the day, so March 1st, 1980, 89. No, 1990. Okay. Because it was
Okay.
the day my daughter was born. My wife gives birth. I go home. Chuck's, anyway.
You got the
Um,
deal.
yeah, because I'd phoned and left a voicemail on his system that essentially said, probably a little bit more politely, should have got off the pot. I'm tired of this. So they hired this guy who went on to become the CEO eventually of Omer's Realty. Anyway, that's how I got in the business.
Yeah.
And I got in tech because Ellis Don ended up being a client after, and this will make this, you'll enjoy this. So will everybody else that's in tech. Ellis, wonderful people. And I got a call from Jeff Smith one day, who was the CEO by that time. And they had just gotten, they'd done a deal for IBM.
Okay.
And they ended up taking a couple of AS400s in trade, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so IBM came in, put it all together. They threw the switch on a Monday. And of course, they were going from an NCR batch coding system, okay, to an AS400. Nothing worked. So they
Mm.
got the trailers out in the back. They're hand cutting these checks. And I get hired to go out and hire a director of MIS that understood how to use technology for competitive advantage. And I
Wow.
did that. And that's how that part of the business started on the construction side. So construction wise, we built probably 10% of downtown Ottawa, probably 1% of downtown Toronto. We did Euro Disneyland for the Reichmans, not sorry, Canary Wharf for the Reichmans. We did Euro Disneyland, Canadian Embassy in China in construction, and we started building tech along the way. And this guy named John Reed heard about me one day, and he was the executive director of Canadian Advanced Technology Alliance. So he took me
Mhm.
out for lunch and sort of convinced me to open a search firm just for technology companies. So, because they were falling behind. So I did. And I ended up being CTO, Chief Talent Officer,
Mhm.
and or on the backboard, the backroom guy from 93 until his passing, 5 years ago.
Mm.
We were friends. This is how this flow through share comes in later.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was it. And I did my first lift out. I don't even know what a lift out is. We had a client that literally had all this money and needed to build these buildings and didn't have any project managers, didn't have an accounting firm, nothing. So I took an entire accounting department out of another real estate company. It wasn't the first time I ever did a lift out, but the first time I got paid for it. So I took the controller, the supervisor of accounting, the payables,
The whole
everything
package, the whole deal.
all in one shot. And they all went, it's so funny. I get to tell the story because they went out to celebrate that night. They all got new jobs. They didn't like this company where they were working. They went out to celebrate that night. I didn't go. And that's when they found out that they were all going together to the same company the
No, they
following
didn't
Monday.
know
Oh,
it.
you can't make this stuff up. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God, that is hilarious.
It was just, yeah, it was,
So the
it was
whole team
the whole team.
independently was picked up at the same time. They
Yep.
all signed up, and then afterwards they learn they're all
Yep.
going to the same. Oh my God, that's phenomenal.
I
This.
even took the departmental secretary. So toute la quête là. From
Oh my
there,
God. You know what? There's a comedy movie right in there.
no, the comedy is what I did for Nortel. Nortel had this company that started with, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's so much bigger now. Anyway, they were in the they were doing Webtone,
Okay.
and they wanted us to hire 300 engineers. And I said, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I don't like, no offense, I don't like engineers. I love CIOs, CTOs. Love the business side. I don't like people that make decisions based on how big their monitor is or what kind of chair they got. Um, so we went out and we hired three VPs for this new division,
Hmm.
and they brought 295 engineers with them. And this company took out a billboard across the street from where Nortel put all these guys that says, "We know who you are, and we know what you've done." So everybody at Nortel saw it, and Ottawa was really offended. That the city was offended, but they should have been not offended at the company that did this, which is much bigger than us, than Nortel. But it was Nortel that had the stones to do that.
Oh my
So
God.
these are the kinds of things you get to do. And when the downturn came
Yeah.
in 2000, I had a lot of friends. I was in New York. I came back from this project in New York, and I'm walking to my office, and I'm passing all these people that are standing in line, I think, for the British Embassy, to get their passports stamped.
Yeah.
And I'm just walking down, walking, 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 walking. No, they're all lined up at my door. Had to have been 1,000 of them easily. And I say to Christine and Nicole, I said, what are these people doing here? I said, well, you've been away. Nortel did a massive layoff, and they gave them everybody in when they did outplacement,
Yeah.
brought them all in the gym. They said, here's the list of the top 10 recruiters in Ottawa. Go talk to them. That was
Mhm.
outplacement, right?
Yeah.
So we were at the top of the list. So that's why I got all these people there. And we couldn't
Oh,
get a line out. I took two people, a husband and wife team, placed them both. And I said, you don't tell anybody that I did this. I have no friends, don't care. I don't want to be known for doing this, but they were the first two there. So I took them and placed them. But we couldn't get a line out. So I decided to go down to Chapters and write a small little guide, like how to get a job for, techies. So I read a whole bunch of books, and then I came back and said, they don't make sense, including What Color is Your Parachute? And Dick and I were
yeah.
friends until he passed. But his book, the least of the lot. So I decided to write a little book, look at like 2 or 3 pages. And then one of my friends said, I'm taking off for 3 months to go to Europe doing a project. I want to see the book when you're back. I said, yeah, sure. So he was gone for 3 months. It took me a month to write this book. It took my father, I had to hire my dad. It took my father 2 months to edit it down from 1,000 pages to about 110.
Mm.
And then what we did was I was trying to raise money to build English schools in the province of Quebec. I live on the Quebec side of Ottawa,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
nothing had been built since 1968. The buildings that were in was just crap, fire hazards. Um, so I took this book, it was in digital form, well, paper format, and we put it in Word, and then we sold it online. This is back in 2002,
Wow.
for 80 bucks
That's
US. For 80 bucks US, we
right.
sold thousands of copies. And what we did is we took the money and we put the money into the Western Quebec Education Foundation, which my father and I had formed to do this. And then Charest got elected
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Quebec, and we ended up getting I ended up taking that book and taking it to a publisher and turning it into a real book, career guide for the high-tech professional. And I'll come back to this in a second. But we built the three schools, or Mr. Charest built the three schools. And we've got the only three schools built in Quebec in the last, well, since 1968.
Wow.
But we took all that money and threw it over the fence. And I published the book. And after I'd written this, I knew I was doing this deal. I sent a copy. I called Jay Conrad Levinson and said, listen, I've read everything you've already done, blah, blah, blah. He goes, listen, I'm sitting at my desk right now in California. I said, oh, I'm sorry. Is this a bad time? He says, no, I'm laughing because your letter, your thank you letter that I wrote, I don't know, 10 years earlier, said it's sitting on my wall. I said, you're making this up. He said, no.
Really?
So he said, what can I do? I said, well, can you read it? Tell me if it's any good. He goes, sure. It's like, 14 baud, 14.4 modem, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, sent it down. 2 weeks later, he calls and says, Red, I love it. I gave it to my daughter, Amy, because she's looking for a job. What else can I do? I said, can you write the forward? He said, well, I'm an author. I'm a writer, so I get paid for this stuff. I said, how much? He says, $1,000. I said, done. And so he wrote the forward. Here's a lesson for everybody that's listening. He wrote the forward. And then I took the forward and I phoned a guy named Seth Godin. And I said,
Hmm.
hey, Seth, my name is, and J. Conrad Levinson just wrote the forward for, will you give me, a quote for the back cover? Yeah, sure. So he did. And so I did the same thing. Guy Kawasaki, Stephen Covey. Stephen told me to F off,
Even Cody. Yeah. Yeah.
at the time. He told me to F off. I said, you must be having a bad day. Because I bought the books, I've gone to the courses, I drank the Kool-Aid. I can't believe
Yes.
you'd actually say that. So he relents, I send it to him, I expect nothing. Um, Meanwhile, I got some others. And then the day before I got to hand it in, I get his secretary calls me and says, I can't believe this, but he's giving you a quote for your back cover of your book. He just doesn't do that. He says, you can't go anywhere else. It can only go on the back cover of the book. You can't talk about it. I said, hey, great. We ended up talking many, many times. So that's how I ended up as an author. It was sort of like I didn't wanna.
You
So
fell
then
into it. Yeah.
I'm in Toronto a year later, and I'm going to meet Jay for the first time. And I pick him up. I watched this seminar that he put on for, I think it was Sony. Anyway,
Hmm.
I'm driving him back to the airport, and I said, you know what? We should do guerrilla marketing for job hunters.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Be careful what you ask for, right? Next thing you know, I get a call from his publicist and his agent, who became my agent, and I'm writing guerrilla marketing for job hunters.
There we go.
Yeah, and I've done 3 iterations of that book, and that has given me the ability to call almost anyone in the world as a candidate, even as a client, I'll get to that in a second, and say, hey, my name's David Perry. I'm the author of, Guerrilla Marketing for Job Hunters. No recruiter opens with that statement.
Yeah.
They open with a statement that sort of fumbles around why they're calling you. Yeah. And then I say, and I'm also, but this has allowed me to get into anywhere I wanted to.
Fantastic.
And
Absolutely brilliant.
that with brilliant or lucky. I didn't have anything else. I'll
Well,
call it luck.
let's call
Let,
it
let,
brilliant.
us call it anyway. So um, business was great. And in 2008, I had won. I was one of five people that were selected to supply the Canadian government with executives. It was a $50 million package.
Wow.
So we won we're one of five people. There used to be one person, and I questioned that. So the government changed it, and
Yeah.
we one of five, and we were number two. But never wrote a piece of business, not a nickel. But 4 days after we announced that we'd done this, I have a massive stroke. I'm in the hospital. I can't read, can't write, can't walk, can't talk, nothing. It was a massive stroke. And unfortunately, a couple of my competitors in Ottawa found out about this and they went around town because my clients were quite well known. I didn't talk about them, but everybody knew who
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
clients were.
Yeah.
And they went around town and told all my clients that I was brain dead. Technically they were correct. But that was a bit of a blow at the time. And as luck would have it, two things happened. One, I got out in 10 days. I was speaking words, and then in day five, I was speaking words. How am I doing on time? Okay.
We're
And
doing, yeah, we're doing okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and then about a week later, I could put can and not together as a sentence. So I'm sitting at home and I'm watching Oprah. Like my brain is mush. I'm awake 45 minutes a day. That's it. Thank God for insurance. The doctor said, "Listen, I'll give you a certificate, and you can take 2 years off." And I'm laughing at him. I said, "You don't know who my boss is, eh?" He said, "No." So forget it. I got to go to work. So I'm watching Oprah, and
Yeah.
she has this author on who's a neuroscientist who wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight.
Mhm.
She had had a stroke. They hadn't found her for a day. She was a complete vegetable. She was put in a hospital. She was there for 7 years, did not get better until her mother literally went in, picked her up, took her home, and started from scratch. You know, pick up a fork, get it in your mouth, the whole 9 yards. And when she finally got better, she wrote this book called My Stroke of Insight. I saw this on Oprah. I said, huh. So I called my publisher at John Wiley and Sons and said, the book's been out for a couple of years now. It's kind of stale. We should do Guerrilla Marketing 2.0. She said, great. Can you get it to me like within 2 years? I said, this is May. I said, no, you'll have it in September. Okay. My wife comes walking I got an office at home, comes walking around the corner and she says, what are you doing? You can't use your hands because I couldn't use them. I couldn't even use a pen. She said, how are you going to write? You can't even read, you moron. I said, thank you very much for your support. So what I did the next day is I
Um,
called a bunch of people that I knew were recruiters, many of which I'd asked to do a small piece for the first book. They became famous. And I didn't tell them I'd had the stroke, but I asked them, that was a good piece. Can you do this piece? So we pieced together um,
mm,
new stuff in the book. I could talk, so somebody was
yeah. Yeah.
typing for me. And that's how we did Guerrilla Marketing for Job Hunters 2.0. So while that's happening, talk about lucky, Dalibor. I'm doing this. I hand in the book. Not more than maybe 3 weeks later, this one young lady had interviewed me for the Wall Street Journal, like a year or two earlier,
Yeah.
and the article finally came out where they nicknamed me the Rogue Recruiter.
The
What had
road.
happened? I only find this out afterwards when I went down and did Wall Street Journal TV. What happened was she handed in the article within about a week of talking to me, and her editor said, "This is bullshit. This guy's a flim-flam, man. There's no way any of this stuff really happened." So I had given her 7 or 8 people to fact check with. Yeah, she fact checked with more than 90 people. Went back to him and said, yeah, no, this is the real deal. So they published the article. Well, I'd lost all this business in Ottawa except for two clients, great people.
Yeah.
And the others, I didn't blame them, you know. But the business just went completely vertical. Were calling in from Japan,
Wow.
Australia, the UK, all over the States. And this one guy calls me, and he's a little in like, anyway, 8 o'clock my time. He calls me from California. Oh, is this a web recruiter? Anyway, I solved his issue. If you read it yesterday, that was the first case study. You know, we were in and out of that search in about 10 weeks, where most of the two largest had failed, both of them each for a year, because it was a different way of looking at doing recruiting. And we're going to talk about that later, not the way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
people need to know how we're
Yeah.
picking people out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how we ended up with hiring greatness, because that was this story of my 1,000th search. And I
Yeah.
agreed to write that book as a storybook because I like the goal and I tried to emulate that. Not well, but I like the goal. And
So
I said
David,
to,
over your career, I'm counting in my head. You published, is it 7 books?
yeah, eight.
8.
I'm on my ninth, and the 10th comes right after that. And then I retire. I swear to God. No, no, I swear to God. So, yeah,
So clearly wealth, like you are the legend of Canadian executive search and recruitment business. Like for 40 years, we just learned 40 years in the industry. And as I also heard, you actually started a company focused on tech recruitment. What I would love to get your thoughts on, David, is today in 2025, with all the innovation, tech changes occurring, with all the expectations of technology creating better futures for all, it's my point of view, it is superbly important for every organization to figure out who is their tech leader that can ignite the promise of potential of technology and information and then elegantly move them forward, right? Now, what I would love to get your thoughts on is specifically for tech
be careful
executive.
because you asked.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's right. Specifically for tech executive roles, so CIO,
Hmm.
CTO. What are the sort of organizations looking for today in their tech executive versus perhaps what should they be looking for, David?
Okay. Let me tell you let's start with what they were looking for
Yeah,
when I first started. When I
sure.
first started, typically I was doing command and control leaders on the tech side, the super technicians, and also very much the saviors, the executives that had a short-term horizon. That's what I looked for probably the first 15 years of my career. It was, oh shit, find us someone that can fix this. Okay.
A fixer.
Yeah, a fixer.
Fixer.
Whether it's sales, engineering, information technology, and I've done enough CIOs, to not be able to count them on two hands. Um, Now, what are they looking for now? Most of them pretty much the same thing. What they should be looking for is someone who understands how to build a team. Because, yeah, we're entering the fourth industrial revolution now. We call it 4.0. The Western civilization won the first three, right? Well, it's yet to be determined who's going to get 4.0. That's not been
Very good
determined yet.
point.
And the
That's
future, so the future is up for grabs. The question is, what will be the differentiator? So I'm getting to the answer to the question in a second. The first industrial revolution, with steam led to the mechanization of work, electricity, same sort of thing, and computers. The whole point of the industrial revolutions was to remove people from the equation, right? Well, the common themes of those revolutions was to remove people, and Industry 4.0 is about to change all of that.
yeah.
Here's why. Um, the emerging world, we're all connected by, my cell phone's behind me, but we're all connected, right? So what I know today is knowledge. Yeah, pretty fast, right? I mean, we watched this years ago with HP. HP was coming out with a new printer literally every 90 days to try and, because someone else came out with it, they took it apart, put a new one together, lower price, whatever. We talk about 4.0 is not AI. 4.0 is about change and chaos. In the emerging world, all of us are connected together. Okay. Everybody's connected to the knowledge. Well, Nick, you must know Nick Bontis, Epic Master. Okay, well, he coined that. He's famous for saying the codified knowledge of the world in 1930s doubled by 1960s, doubled again by 1970, doubled again by whatever. Well, right now the codified knowledge of the world doubles every 11 hours. So Dalibor, that means that knowledge has a shelf life of a banana. Okay,
Yeah, and the
so
cost of it with new AI system, the cost of it is coming down to
yeah,
zero. Like the cost of not knowing is going to be zero. It'll be available to everybody at any time, right?
yeah, and since knowledge equals opportunity, then the opportunities are available to all organizations and they're growing exponentially. And because everyone is connected, um, everybody has these opportunities. So what's the differentiator? This is where we're getting to the question. Okay.
It's a phenomenal
Competitive.
perspective to have. It's I just want to reemphasize what you just said because I think it's really important. As cost of knowledge comes to zero, it's available to everybody, and it's the knowledge that creates opportunities, and therefore the the cost of identifying opportunities is also coming down to zero. The cost of being able to not identify but act on opportunities, right?
Absolutely. Okay,
The,
so competitive advantage today um, really relies on an organization's ability to spot, to have the knowledge, to spot opportunities, and to move on it. Here's where the leadership stuff comes in. Because essentially whoever can spot these things and do it faster wins, right? Well, what we learned in the computing age was that creativity accounts for a lot. You got two people. Well, two and two doesn't equal, one and one doesn't equal two. One and one can equal six or more because there's that creative space between two people who trust each other and work together that allows you to form new knowledge and therefore new new products, right? Are you with me?
yeah,
Okay. So what you need to do is you need to build an organizational culture that facilitates the ongoing creation of new value. And that's not rocket science, but it requires a fundamental change in perspective on the part of the organization and their managers, a change that will challenge current management practices. To be successful in the 4.0 world, managers are going to have to be evaluated on what they're delivering today and how well they're preparing their teams to deliver tomorrow. So, what's the secret? Okay. So, Ron and I are writing this book, Revolutions Need Leaders, and we brought it down to three things.
revolutions need leaders.
Right. And the subtitle today is How the Fourth Industrial Revolution Has Changed the Rules of the Leadership and Recruiting Games. We're still playing with the
Let's
subtitles.
yeah, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
But the outcome is you need a leader that can build an innovative, high-performance team that's connected by trust and common cause. Okay. Um, when you've got trust and common cause, and the whole team focusing on the same thing, those teams are prepared to deliver today. And because they trust each other and can say, I don't know, or your idea is better, they're sharing openly. That's the point. So they can deliver because they're getting ready to delivering today and they're getting ready to deliver tomorrow as well. So there's three things you need. You need a leader, and especially for CIO, because CIOs are so important, right?
Yeah.
You need a leader who can help others build their own self-belief. Okay. You need a leader who can build trust and connection within and amongst the team. And you need someone who is able to build belief in the organization and connect a team through common cause. So when you've got common cause, I mean, that's how we were able to lift almost 300 people out of that other company. These
Yeah.
leaders were absolute solid people. So, when I approached the first one, I said, can I want to go talk to this guy too. And he said, yeah, sure. But he's not going to come. I said, well, if he does, will you come? Yeah. So I went and talked to the third one. Yeah. And I mean, that's how I got Cognos' BI team. I took the VP of sales and the VP of marketing out of Cognos in one shot. They were each other's first children's godfathers, and neither knew that I was recruiting them. They've both been there for years, and they didn't know until the day they went to resign.
Yeah.
And we almost lost the deal because Zambanini actually closed the whole division down for the day and sent everybody home on a Friday as he did damage control. Anyway, if when you can find somebody who understands they got to park their ego, that they have to embrace change and chaos, that they don't have all the ideas, because it's impossible now for one person. Remember, we probably both grew up with the same thing. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so
Yeah. Yeah.
much,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you can't
Absolutely.
possibly know it all anymore.
100%.
You have
Absolutely.
to we talked about a CIO, a CTO, a CTA. I mean, all these guys have to get together, and you can't find them in one person. And that's the question you started out asking me. What are clients looking for? Clients are looking for that one silver bullet, that one guy that ticks 50 things off the list. They don't exist. And if
Yeah.
they did exist, Dalibor, why would they come and work for you?
Yeah.
The best leaders we've found over the years have jobs, and jobs are passionate about. Seriously, if you've ever tried to attract or disengage someone who was really passionate about what they're doing, it's almost impossible.
Very
And
difficult.
the
Yeah.
only way you can recruit someone away, whether it's me or a CEO of a company, is you need to go deep inside your organization. You have to understand what your vision is and be able to articulate not just the vision, but all the things that are standing in your way. We call it, heart, head, feet. You know, you got to connect them to your cause.
Yeah.
That's the heart. The
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
you have to give them all the answers to all the questions that they're going to ask you, and it can't be fluff
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because the guy who's got a job that he loves,
Yeah.
it's like trying to. I was going to say date a nun, and then joke and say it's hard to get into the habit, but I would get in trouble. But my stepmother was a nun, so I can do that. Um, and then the last one is the feet. How do things actually get done? Unless you, as a CEO of a company or the recruiter that's representing the CEO, understand those things to a minute level, then you can't explain it. If you can't explain it, you can't attract a person to something stronger
Yeah.
because they're not coming to something stronger. And that's the point. Recruitment in Canada and the States still live in a 3.0 world where they believe they can, where the CEO says, we need so HR takes the job description out of the database or off the shelf
Yeah.
and says,
Yeah.
to the recruiter, and go get me one of these.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
recruiter runs an ad and gets the best of who's available. Well, that's not recruiting. Recruiting is not about getting the best person available. It's about getting the best person, period.
I love it.
You,
This is true. This is true.
but you can't understand who that best person is for the role unless you've done all this deep work. Looked at all the flaws and said, this is what the strat plan says. How close are we following it? Where are we going? What kind of person do we need to fix this or take us there? And most people do a strat plan every couple of years, stick it on the shelf. It looks pretty. And the consultant gets paid, but they don't follow it. I mean, you know this. You were a CIO. You consulted
100%.
these people ad nauseum, right?
100%.
So those are the three abilities. Belief in self, building a team that believes in itself and cooperates, and then getting the team and the individuals to believe in that cause,
Common cause. Common
common
cause.
cause. So the last CIO that I recruited, this is a good example, was 4 years ago, and he stayed for 3 years. And there's a reason, was the CIO for Telesat. Now, I got a professional team of 10 researchers. So I went out and said, we need this, 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 and this. Dan Goldberg, the team were very specific on what they wanted, and they were right. And they came back. There were, oh God, there's like 750 some odd people that you could go tick, 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 tick. But there were only three that I was interested in because I needed an ego-neutral guy who had communicate. At the end of the day, ego-neutral, good communication skills, had the swagger to
Mm.
stand on his own, the gravitas to stand on his own, not just with the CEO, but the entire industry.
Yeah.
And so we interviewed one candidate with the client, and then it took me 9 months to negotiate that deal.
Wow.
Uh, but he was the right guy. Stayed for 3 years. The only reason he left is because they hadn't raised the money yet for the Leo system. And but 2 months, 3 months after he left, they did that. But that's my point. The better you do the deep work, the better you are able to go and find someone. This guy was the CIO of Lockheed. Before that, at age 25, he sold the company that he had developed as an engineer student to a little company called CGI.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and became their first CIO when he was 25 or 20, maybe when he was 27. He's a pilot. You know, he flew his own planes. Anyway, this was the guy, and
This
and
is the person. Yeah.
there was no way he was leaving until I figured out what he was all about and gave him a better cause to
Yeah.
get behind. And this
So let
cause was nationalizing that. So go ahead.
So David, this is excellent. These are the insights I think that like I'm certainly learning. I hope the audience too. Um, when you look at the executive, so now you helped us sort of see and understand how you're approaching search for a tech executive and what you're looking for. What are those traits? You're not looking for a technologist engineer anymore,
Oh,
which is what,
you still need all that stuff.
yeah. But
Oh yeah,
now
you still need all that stuff. But
that
now,
plus that plus, right?
yeah,
You said ability to mobilize and create a team that is built on trust, ability to paint a compelling picture that is a common cause that everybody's going to be behind, and then the ability to actually influence and motivate that team to come together to connect all the dots.
yeah,
That is sort of a set of attributes that you believe are now essential for tomorrow because we live in a moment of chaos and change, and that is required, right? Is that how I would
yes,
summarize?
yes.
Now let's talk a little bit about something that is, I think, many people are curious, not very many people get to see firsthand. What is a executive compensation package typically look like? What are those elements of an executive comp package that you actually, as a recruiter, are compiling, negotiating, discussing?
Okay. Base salary, bonus based on KPIs, and usually the KPIs are set long before they join. Restricted stock options, stock options, equity, all the regular stuff. But here's what's interesting. The 90s, the 2000s, even the 2000 teens taught everybody a very important lesson. Yeah, salary is important because um, you may have a lot of options, and Nortel guys learned this, right?
Yep.
Unfortunately,
Yep.
they may or may not be able to buy a chocolate bar, and for most people, they're not. And what's happening with compensation is solid base salaries, no question, and KPIs that they set with the CEO ahead of time. So this is how it's going to happen. If these things happen, this is what I get. This is what the team gets. Okay. And they're monitoring them religiously. So what's happened in all this equation is executives are getting really good at flushing out bullshit. There are a lot of CEOs there are a lot of CEOs in this country, specifically in tech. You know, I wouldn't let borrow my car because they're full of crap.
Mm.
Let alone, hook my kite, hook my what to their kite, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
people are getting s- better and better, asking the questions to make sure that the CEO and the board are people they can trust.
Yeah.
Now, because trust is the big issue, right? Because every business, hits a dry spot or three. And you got to know that the guy, I grew up at the United States Air Force Academy in the late 60s, early 70s, and they have a flight team there, the Thunderbirds. They
Yep,
fly
yep,
every day. They fly
yep.
every day 3 o'clock. We were the only Canadians on the base. My dad was a senior officer, and we used to go to parties with these guys. And I remember asking a pilot, I was probably, I don't know, 10. And I asked this guy, when you're up there, what are you thinking about? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? He said, I know exactly what I have to do. I think about nothing. Everybody else knows the plan. We just fly it. If I think for a second, I risk myself and the people on my team. And this comes back to the point. Having a leader that can set a vision, put the objectives there, and make sure that everybody, day in, day out, is focused on the objective. Because we both lived long enough. I got bookcases full of what do they call it? Uh, when software says something on the back and then it just doesn't work. Vaporware. I got I
Vapor,
got
yeah, yeah,
reams of vaporware, right? You can't afford to do that with your career. So if you're a C-level, it doesn't matter CIO or anybody else, you need to make sure that the person you're putting your career with has got the stones to stay the course and not go squirrel,
yeah, 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 yeah.
because that's what happens,
Steady, steady hand,
you know,
steady
and,
hand.
and
This,
that's
yeah,
what happens. And this is what happens with technology, SaaS, whatever. It's always something, right? Um, you need to stay the course and make sure you understand what you're going to deliver according to the strat plan, and you deliver that, and that the senior leadership deliver that. You still have to listen to what's new and great and wonderful and see how it might fit. And that's part of being a C-level.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, no, and saying no is really what they get trained to do
yeah,
best.
yeah. And David, so a question for you. You mentioned something really important. Um, Traditionally, when a recruiter goes and gets the requisition from a client, they would go and then they would advertise the position and solicit resumes and CVs and so forth.
Yeah.
Uh, you said it takes a lot of time, a lot of research to actually be able to identify who is the right candidate, and oftentimes the right candidate actually doesn't apply for the job.
Yeah, I've had two people in 40 years apply to an ad that I actually was the right person.
Yeah, that's
Pure luck.
that was what I was going to ask you. So those 700 people who apply to a job, very likely, very likely the right person is not among them. The right person is actually busy delivering,
Yeah.
completely committed to their purpose, passion, and ikigai,
Yep.
but that's the
Absolutely.
person you want. How do you go about finding who they are and where they are?
How detailed an answer you want?
General, so that people who are listening, who feel that they are those right people, but they're not following, you know, ads in the market to apply, they're not interested in finding the job. How would you find them?
Okay, so here's two things I need to do. Um, I find them because I can reach out to what we call in the new book pointers. I'll reach out to someone who literally sits above the ecosystem, and I'll say, "Listen, this is what I'm looking for. Who fits?" And they already,
Personal
because I've been
network.
doing this for 40 years, and they'll go, "Well, they're not looking for a job." I know they're not looking for a job. I get that. They don't have a resume, nothing. That's okay. I'll say, "Tell me who can actually do this job." And I'll get that name and I'll go and do the research. And generally now, I do the research instead of the recruiters. And I use that example in the chapter 3 of the book. The search firms that had failed to hire the COO. They had run ads. They did everything they were supposed to. And I was arrogant enough to believe when I took the role, I was arrogant enough to believe they failed because they had obeyed, as they should have, their hands-off rules and hadn't talked to the people that my client wanted. So I took the role. I mean, in 4 weeks, I'm going, oh my God, what have I done? Because I actually talked to them all and they weren't right. So now I'm stuck. So what I did is I actually sent a FedEx package to the 10 chairs of 10 of the largest manufacturing organizations in Milwaukee and said, hey, this is who I am. I'm looking for this guy. Here's the spec. Who do you know? None of them called me back. I had to call them all. But in the end, six of them all told me this one guy, and I laughed. And six out of eight people I talked to, six of them said, this is the guy, you'll never get him. And I said, why? And they told me. So it took me about 3 days to figure out what I was going to do. And so I phoned up one day. I called this guy directly. And I said, hey, Jim, my name's David Perry. I got to ask you, how's your honeydew list? What? Who is it? I'm real growly bear, angry. And I said, my name is, and I know that I talked to six guys who told me you're the guy for this role. And but I'm never going to get you. So I'm calling to find out how your honey list is going because guys like you tend to get bored. And he said, tell me about the job. I said, no, 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 no. I'm a poor salesman. I would not do justice to this thing. Let me send you an overview. You sit down and read it, and either I'm on crack or we got something to talk about. And that's how this started. It's the same thing with every search. When we do this, I look for that one person who understands what the ecosystem looks like and can pick out that one person who is always delivering. And for some reason, his team always seems to be ready for the next challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's how we do it.
That's it. Spotters. You are like it's about human connection. It's about human. It's about you knowing people who know people. That's what it is. And that's David, and that takes decades to build. Well, yeah, build on trust, but that takes a long time to build.
So here's how everybody that's listening can sort their way through, offers in no time at all when a recruiter calls. The three questions you ask. You call and you say, okay, do you have an exclusive? You say yes, no. It's binary answer. So yes or no. You always ask all three questions.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Do you have an exclusive?
Like you're the only recruiting firm working on this role.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Because typically recruiters, there could be 15 companies working on this role. Anyway, so if it's yes, you go, okay, well, have you recruited for this client successfully before? Yes, no. And the third question is, have you ever placed someone like me? So if you get all three yeses, talk to them, have a conversation. If you get a no on the first one, you have to ask the second question. Okay? If you get a no on the second question, you must ask the third. And here's why. When a recruiter has your resume, they have no obligation, and you have no right of you should have no right of expectation that they're going to use the resume in any way they can. So they can send it into that client, even though you don't know. They can send it to the client, and if the client turns out to like you, well, even the resume didn't come from that recruiter. They got to pay that recruiter. So that's why your career, your resume, your profile has to be under your control at all times. Right. If you can do that, then you eliminate all the noise, and people will only start coming to you. I can't call him because he knows I'm full of shit. Pardon my language. But if you ask those questions, you eliminate the noise, and then you get to talk to real people who have real situations, and then you start to ask, the hard questions. Yeah. What's the objective? We did one where we actually did a position profile where we specified, here's what you, as this candidate, needs to deliver year 1, year 2, year 3. Right in the job description. There's no if, buts, and maybe. And candidates need to understand that. So there's no harm in having lunch with someone, but maintain control at all times. Okay. And if you're great at what you do, you don't have to network. If you're great at what you do, we're going to find you. If you really want to cheat, everybody, I can tell you this, but anybody listening can't tell anybody else because this is, one of these things. So if you want to be found, here's what you do. What do you want to be found for? AI. So go to Amazon, buy a popular book on AI, read it, and then write an Amazon review. Not, oh, Jesus, this was an easy book to read. I really liked it. No, something with depth and meaning. Yeah. Because if you get to the second case study there, you'll find that's how I found this guy. I was looking for a chief. What do they call it? What do we end up calling him? chief relationship officer,
Mhm.
and I interviewed, I tagged and talked to every single C-level VP inside the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 50 globally, only to find two people, neither one of which I could move. And I was on the hook to deliver this. So I started to look for an author on this subject. And this guy happened to be a wily author as well. And he wrote a book called War, The Wallet Allocation Rule. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, no.
Brilliant book. So I called this guy. I texted him, I emailed him. It took a dozen before he finally gave me 2 minutes of his time. And as he says in the forward for executive recruiting for dummies, he gave me 2 minutes of his time because he figured he would just, I'd ask the same stupid questions and he'd blow me off. In the end, we talked for an hour and a half. I couldn't get rid of him. He's a friend now. Just unbelievable. He ended up jokingly saying, "Well, that's my 2IC. It's my chief of staff. He's the only guy that fits the model." He was right. And Luke Williams, 3 months later, was working for AECOM as the youngest VP they ever hired in AECOM's history, and he did a brilliant job. And now he's been at two companies that have been bought by SuccessFactors and SAP, and now he's over at Microsoft doing the same thing 10 years later. So my
Impressive.
point being, if you're great at what you do, just do your job.
Good.
The right recruiters will find you.
That's
If
very
you if you need to look for something,
yeah.
then can I give another tip?
Sure.
Okay, so if you're looking for a job, here's what you got to do. Real simple. And you can Google this, networking with the newly departed. Got nothing to do with dead people, but I'll tell you
Yeah.
why you call it that way. You make your top 10 list of companies, and then you go to Google and you throw in a couple of search words like CIO, the name of the company, blah, blah, blah. And it'll spit you, and resume, and it'll spit you back the resume of the last CIO there or the whatever. And then you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Dalibor, my name's David Perry. I'm doing some research. I know you used to work at Deloitte. Can I ask you some questions?
Mm.
Who is this? What is this all about?" And but anyway, and you do it. What you can do is you can network back into companies ahead of time, those 10 companies, find out what their critical issues are, see if you've ever solved them anywhere else, because you can talk about that when you do a letter or when you do an interview. But more importantly, you can eliminate the putzes, right? Oh, the boss, CEO doesn't care about him, blah, blah, blah. Then you just eliminate those people, or maybe that's an opportunity. But you can
Wow,
do
that's
that, you can do that homework ahead of time and cut down your list of top 10 companies to three.
three. Yeah, yeah.
And when you're talking to these people and you say, well, what are their burning issues? I hate that term, but what are their
Yeah.
burning issues? When you're
You'll know
talking
this.
to the CEO or whatever, you can say, hey, I know that, and this is an issue, but I did this over here. Want to have a coffee?
Yeah.
And it's over with. It's that
Fantastic,
simple.
David. David, this is like gold nuggets. Thank you. Look, David, we are approaching time. I want to make sure we touch on the topic of flow through shares. You know, this is how we actually originally got connected by your focus, your interest, you advancing the concept. Can you share with me and with the audience what do you believe is the value of flow through? What is flow through shares model, and why do you think it's important?
Flow through shares are a tax advantaged share that is only used by the mining industry right now. Okay.
Mining industry.
Mining industry only. It used to be oil and gas, but sorry, mining and critical minerals. It allows the investor to invest money and draw down what they have to pay in tax. That's as simple as it gets. Okay. And this is only used by mining. And it's $138 million. Sorry, $138 billion is what mining adds to GDP. Well, tech, tech, and all the problems we have in tech. Tech is 125 billion, but they're not allowed to use this tool. So what we want, Paul Labarge, Paul Brent, and myself, and a bunch of other people that are supporting this, we want the government to extend flow through shares to tech so that the brilliant ideas that start in Canada, you ever heard of Java? I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Stay here in Canada, and we build Canadian companies, and we employ Canadians and we keep the IP here rather than have it going south of the border.
So David, what people who are curious about this, what can they do? Where can they learn more? what else can people do to help surface this issue and influence? I'm going to assume politicians would be
Yep.
the ones to make choice here. So what is the call for action, David?
Go to canflowthrough.com. So canflowthrouh.com, and leave a message. You can click a button there. It'll take you to the supporters page. You'll see dozens of other people. We only started this 2 weeks ago. Dozens of other people that are supporting this, both politicians and business people, lawyers, because they want to push it out as well. Now, the industry has tried twice in the past. Paul Labarge did this about 20 years ago, and they said no. Similar thing, they said no. We have no idea why. Okay, and Terry Matthews did this 7 or 8 years ago. No, nobody ever said why. They just said no. So here's the interesting thing. I had lunch with, because I tripped across him, former Prime Minister Chrétien, 4 months ago. I sat down and I asked him why. Because my uncle used to be his guy when he was Minister of Finance with Trudeau, before my uncle went on to go to the World Bank and the IMF. I said, why not? He said, I don't know. I said, yeah, Paul Martin doesn't either. Neither does anybody else on the Hill. So when all this capital gains shenanigans started, I said, okay, this is time. So this is why we started to push this thing. And I sent a nice letter to Prime Minister Trudeau on December 4th and said, here's all the advantages. And the letter's on the site. Here's all the advantages. Well, let's talk about this. And then stuff went sideways. And now I'd like the politicians to have a debate and start to talk about this, because there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't. The Brits have a similar tool that they're using just for tech. And so do the Aussies. No, I'm sorry, man. Why not? And until someone can tell me why not, it doesn't make sense. And right now, the whole tech industry is very vulnerable because most of the large technology companies that are here are U.S. branch plants. And by the way, flow through shares, we've done all this. It's taken me years to do all this, but the flow through shares will play well with SR and ED tax credits. There's so little change that has to happen. But, I don't understand why Canada makes it hard for Canadians to invest in themselves. That's an open question. So the more people we get to go to canflowthrough.com and make a point and then tell their friends, the faster I get this in the politicians' hands and get an answer. And hopefully it's a positive answer. Yes, this is a great idea. Do this. In which case I disappear. And, I wrote an article about this, and I essentially said, as Trump builds tariff walls, we build digital wings, because technology and IP can't be tariffed. Come on, guys, let's get behind this and go. I mean, we blew it with the Avro Arrow, and I still whine about that. But come on, I've a lot of American clients, and they tease me about two things. They tease me about losing the NHL Stanley Cup every year, and I remind them that their team, whichever it was, won with guys that we can recall. Okay, we can call them back.
Yeah.
And I point out to them that it was Canada that was on the moon first, which is a fact. The feet on the lunar lander, those were built by a Canadian company. So technically, we landed first.
Oh my God, that's good.
That's awesome. All the guys from the Avro Arrow, they went to Boeing, they went to Lockheed, and they went to NASA. So come on. It was the Canadian boys that put the thing up.
David, this was fantastic. Thank you very much for this hour of wisdom and advice around executive search and recruitment. And thank you very much for calling out these flow through shares as a concept that I actually believe could be transformational for our Canadian tech ecosystem, for our Canadian tech startups and scale-ups. So thank you very much. This is the moment to activate this. Of course, we are very near the federal election. So now would be the moment to call your MPs and talk to them about, flow through shares and ask for their help. With that, David, I want to thank you very much for your time. This conversation was recorded and soon will be available on TechTonic Conversations. Thank you again, and have yourself a lovely Monday, David.
Thank you, Dalibor. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. All the best.
Bye for now.